Hello, everyone. Good evening. We're so excited to be here live with everyone on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you, everyone, for joining us virtually. We're going to be giving people a few more minutes to trickle in and join us before we get started. But my name is Lucia Marquez. I'm a policy advocate. Oh my gosh, there's my cat. I'm so sorry. I'm a policy advocate with Cause here based in Ventura County. We have some really amazing speakers joining us tonight, and we're really excited to introduce you to them. Some of our speakers, I can give you a mini intro right now. We're going to have Shahir Yar and Yesenia from Warehouse Worker Resource Center. They're a nonprofit organization that works to improve working conditions for warehouse workers in Southern California. We also have Dan Flaming from Economic Roundtable. They're a research organization who specializes in analyzing economic and social and environmental conditions. And then we also have Yvette Torres for Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice, based in the Inland Empire, which is heavily impacted by Amazon fulfillment centers. So for those of you just joining us, again, my name is Lucia Marquez with Cause, and I'll be moderating tonight's panel. And so just to give you all a little bit of an introduction of who we are and what Cause does in the community for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're based in Ventura and Santa Barbara County, where we work to improve working conditions for low-wage workers. We advocate for housing and renters' rights, immigrants' rights, and also environmental justice. Some of the recent work that we've done in Oxnard has been fighting for clean air and clean energy when we fought against another power plant being put on the coast of Oxnard, which we did win. But we've also done a lot of work around workers' rights, where we worked with community partners to develop the Farm Worker Bill of Rights, which then turned into the Farm Worker Resource Program, which is meant to aid farm workers to support them to make sure working conditions are safe. And so, yeah, getting into our panel tonight, just giving everyone a sense of, what is it that we're discussing and why are we having this virtual panel? When the city of Oxnard announced that they approved a major Amazon warehouse to be built here in Oxnard, there was a lot of excitement from city leaders, but also a lot of questions from the community about, the working conditions. Are they going to be safe or dangerous working conditions for workers? What about more diesel trucking and pollution coming into our communities? And then also, how good of a financial deal is this for the city? And so we invited expert speakers who could really speak to Amazon's track record in other communities. So before I introduce our first speaker, I just wanted to share that we are going to have a Q&A at the end of this panel. So be sure to submit your comments or questions in the comment section. But yeah, I am excited to introduce our first speaker. It's going to be Shahir Yar Kazuji from Warehouse Worker Resource Center. And so let's bring him onto the stream. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's great to be here. So I can just get a little background about myself. I'm Shahir Yarkowski. I'm the Executive Director of the Warehouse Worker Resource Center. We're a nonprofit based in Ontario, and we work with folks across Southern California, especially LA, or Riverside and San Bernardino counties, where there's been a huge amount of goods movement and warehouse development in the last 20 years.
Yeah, thank you. So you are definitely someone we're really excited to bring to this panel because of your experience in organizing workers, especially within the warehouse worker industry. And so for our first question, we really just wanted to really open it up to, how is Amazon changing the future of work? And what does that mean for working families here in Oxnard?
So what we've seen with Amazon and really with the goods movement sector in general is that they're adopting a lot of the same kinds of models that you guys have probably seen in agriculture and food processing in terms of really trying to make work extremely unstable and insecure for workers. Um, Traditionally, what we've seen in warehousing before, say, the 1980s, was that you'd see a lot of full-time permanent jobs, a lot of unionization. Since then, we've seen increased use of staffing agencies and other systems to keep people in a situation where they have to call in every day to find out if they have work. A lot of workers who work very short, stretches, a few weeks here and there, and then are told to move on. The Amazon has really taken that to the next level. So Amazon is now our biggest employer in the Inland Empire. As the Inland Empire has really become dominated by goods movement. Instead of producing goods, this is where goods that are imported and brought into the country are redistributed. But Amazon, beyond just what we've seen with other warehouse companies, is really trying to do this through a technology frame. So they have extremely high levels of turnover. Like I said, the average worker stays on for less than a year. Even though this is the biggest employer in our region, workers flow in and flow out constantly. And this is because the company moves people so hard. It pushes people so hard. Everybody's used to working hard and dealing with difficult employers, but Amazon has technologized it. They have a camera on you at all times as a worker, and they make sure that they're tracking your rate and your rate of work, your pace, and how often you're moving your products, depending on your job classification. If you're not able to keep up, you're immediately punished based on their surveillance of you, their surveillance of how often you're clicking your scanner or how often you're picking up your products or whatever your job is. This leads to workers again moving as quickly as they can and not taking those kinds of extra periods of time to take a breather, to slow down. And we all know when we rush, things get more dangerous. We don't look both ways before we go across an aisle where there might be a forklift coming. Those kinds of accidents happen, but also more kind of long-term injuries occur. Workers doing the same repetitive motion again and again, consistently all day, 10, 12 hours a day for weeks and months on end, lead to workers who are extremely young in their early 20s getting the kinds of injuries that we're used to seeing with people who are been working in warehouses for decades. These repetitive stress injuries are injuries that Amazon is tries to then say, well, did you hurt it playing soccer? Were you injured before you got here? And they try to figure out how to move you on and get you out of there. So we have really this epidemic of workers who are getting injured coming out of these facilities, who are extremely young and are permanently disabled or injured in a way that affects our community and affects our public. So this is kind of what we're seeing with Amazon, is everything that you knew about work but worse, because they have this technology frame, because they're able to watch you and track you at all times. Has a physical impact on workers. Our understanding is it also has a mental impact on workers. Workers are again know that they're being surveilled, know that they have to be responsive at all times. We have workers who have trouble sleeping and trouble really kind of keeping that surveillance out of their lives. So that's a lot of what we've seen, is that Amazon is again like now the second biggest employer in the country, rapidly growing because as you all know, they've had a huge expansion this year because of COVID, because people are buying so much stuff and getting it delivered. And they're really innovating. And now what we're seeing, unfortunately, is that other companies are adopting these same models of surveillance, these same models of how to work people as fast as possible. And with unemployment rates so high, they feel like they can burn through people, unfortunately.
Mm. And so, with Amazon, a big fulfillment company coming into our community, that's something that's very new for the community of Oxnard. I guess I wanted to ask you, like, what are the changes that our community could expect with a large company like Amazon coming in and taking over a large workforce?
Yeah, so depending on the facility, I'm not quite sure how many jobs or how many positions this facility is expected to have, but a lot of the facilities we have in our area employ between 2,000 and 3,000 people at peak, like now right before Christmas rush. And what we've seen again is that initially there's a big rush. People are excited to get those jobs, to get into those facility. It's a well-known company that people think, okay, I could get a good job. They actually do pay, I think they're starting people at $19 an hour, which might be a little bit higher than some other jobs that are available. And then what we saw is that, a few months or years later, a lot of the workers say, well, this isn't what I hoped for, right? This isn't what as good as I hoped, and it actually isn't worth it. In terms of the impacts on the community, again, what we see is that there's instability. It comes from this, right? Instability in terms of the workforce, instability in terms of people who are depending on this company for their livelihood, but also instability in terms of the community, depending on what kind of taxes the company is willing to pay into your city's tax, into your city's coffers, depending on what kinds of impacts it has on the workforce, but also on the public in general. So, major facility is going to have a lot of trucks coming in, a lot of distribution and delivery vehicles coming out. That's going to lead to additional congestion on certain roads and freeways. And of course, the EJ folks will speak more to the impacts directly of the diesel, but we know that there's huge amounts of diesel that'll be spewing from these facilities. And then there's also kind of an attraction situation where if there's an Amazon facility, it might bring other facilities like that because that one facility is successful. Developers tend to kind of cluster up and do the same thing. If they've been successful, they might build others, right, and decide that this is going to be a cluster along the 101. So those are some of the impacts that we've seen. What we see is that there needs to be accountability, right? These workplaces are going to kind of look for this company is going to look for the lowest common denominator. But if the community organizes, gets together, and fights to make things better, we think there's an opportunity to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, what really stood out to me is a really common trend that you mentioned was one warehouse comes in doesn't mean it would be the last. Wow. Well,
Exactly.
I think that building off of this, it would be really great to bring in our next speaker, which could really speak from the perspective of what it's like working for Amazon, working in a warehouse. So our next speaker who is going to join us is Yesenia Barrera, who is an organizer with Worker Resource Center, but is also a previous warehouse worker. So thank you so much for joining us, Yesenia.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me here. Hi, everyone. My name is Yesenia Barrera. I'm actually an organizer with Warehouse Workers Resource Center. Fun fact about me is that I'm actually a former Amazon worker myself. So I kind of got to experience what it's like being an Amazon worker. Sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah, tell us about that. Our question really is, what is it like working in a warehouse? Could you really walk us through what that day to day looks like, what the working conditions are like, and what we could expect?
Yeah, of course. Well, I've worked at different warehouses, but nothing like Amazon. I've even prior to working at Amazon, I would hear bad stories, but it's more of like you have to work there to understand what they're like, what they're kind of like. For starters, something that, took me off guard was how we're tracked. We're tracked by an automated system, as Shahara had mentioned, and it keeps track of workers and their work pace for their work pace for the whole day. So their productivity and what you're doing on your whole shift. So that even includes when workers stop scanning an item, that starts accumulating time, and they call that time off task, or workers call it TOT. But that's when you start accumulating time when you stop scanning or moving, product. Because Amazon knows every time, you stop scanning. So the time starts accumulating. It's bad in the sense where you'll get verbally talked to or you'll get a warning, but TOT can eventually lead to, a lot of workers getting terminated. And that's, that impacts workers in the sense that, like Shahara had mentioned, they need to take a breath. They're supposed to do a certain amount of rate, right? A product that they're supposed to meet a goal every hour. So we're talking about me, for example, wanting to make my rate or not get the TOT would make me not want to take my restroom breaks, right? Not get my water, or I wouldn't drink water because I wouldn't want to use the restroom. I didn't want to kind of chance that. But yeah, if sorry. But yeah, in conclusion, the TOT and the rate kind of made me feel like, it made me feel insecure, and it made me feel overwhelmed, kind of because of all the work I felt like I worked very, it was a very constant pace, very nonstop, very, very robot-like, and not exactly giving me time to, do the extra breather or use the restroom like I would have to. And at the time I thought it was kind of normal. Like this, I get paid. So I thought it was okay, but it's not okay,
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that we've heard a lot about is this talk about the quotas, or really how quotas are used against workers, which really turns into making the work and people like taking away their humanity. And so can you describe more of like what that looks like? I don't know if like quotas are put up on a board, or like how workers are tracked and how that's visually shown in a warehouse.
Yeah, of course. From my, personal experience, our our rates would be posted. They would be printed out and posted like on a leaderboard. Um, it would show, how much workers have done, kind of like a way of encouragement, and I quote encouragement to want to, step it up, speed up your process, catch up with others, and in a way to tell you like, don't fall behind, hurry up. So that. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the next really big conversation around working conditions and the impacts of workers that work in warehouses is really this high turnover rate. So I want to bring also Shahir Yar back to the conversation with us, because he could also chime in. But yeah, what would you say drives that high turnover rate among warehouse workers, and even like what are some of the dangers of working in a warehouse?
Ethan, you want to go ahead and I'll go after you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that one more time?
And so if you could maybe touch on what is it that drives the high turnover rate among warehouse workers, and maybe even speaking to some of the dangers of working in a warehouse or a fulfillment center.
Well, turnover at Amazon is very high. That it's at 100.9% turnover, and that's mainly because Amazon views their workers as disposable, and also their operations are designed right to foster these high turnovers, and a lot of the turnover comes from workers not being able to keep up with their productivity or their rate, and they're fired for that, or many workers leave due to injury, which is why Amazon is constantly hiring to replace those bodies with new ones, uninjured people, um, and some like a lot of the workers that some of the workers that I've actually even spoken to is um, workers have been working injured. They'll work injured and they'll continue working injuring because Amazon said that they're Amazon deemed them to be okay. Your injury is minor, you can get back to work. And in lots of cases, workers end up working hurt and end up getting lifelong injuries, worsening their injuries. So a lot of these injuries include like sprains, tears, and they involve like the shoulders, the back, the wrists, their knees, from all the repetitive motion that they're doing. So all the injuries are mainly caused by like the repetitive, forceful exertions. So.
Shahir, do you want to maybe touch on this question as well?
Yeah, that's all of that. That's absolutely right. I think the only thing I would add is the Amazon aims and really tries to hire people who are 18 to 25 years old. They hire people who they tend to focus on hiring people who have high school diplomas. So they aim for kind of working class young people, children of immigrants. And there's a huge number of those folks in our communities, both in the Central Coast and in the Inland Empire. Kind of folks who might take a couple college classes or take a couple semesters and then take some time off to work. And so they try to kind of push this casualization thing, right? Well, I'm just going to do this for 6 months. I'm just going to do this for a little while. This isn't a career. And they just kind of churn through people. Some people who don't look for a career, which is fine, but they're not really looking in any way to hang on to folks. So you never see anybody who's been working there except for a supervisor for more than 3 years. And so despite it being, again, the second biggest employer in the country, the company goes out of its way to turn people over after a certain period of time. After a couple of years, they actually, for a while there, were actually offering workers, even workers that had perfect records, buyouts, and saying, you've been here 3 years, we're going to offer you a buyout, $3,000 to never come back. And our understanding is that they just don't want to hang on to folks too long. They think people will get hurt after a certain period of time working there, and they just don't want that on their workers' comp balance. But also they'd rather just churn through people. So we just think it's just generally a social problem for us in the Inland Empire. Is their biggest employer, so it's a massive problem for us. Even for people who don't work there, just knowing that's what's happening to our workforce, and that's people who should be starting their careers in a positive manner are rather being kind of bounced around, and that's their model, and that's what we're pushing against.
Mm-hmm. Wow, well, you both really opened up a lot of insight of really what it's like being a worker, and really giving us a sense of why is it that way? Why does Amazon use those strategies in communities and with workers that they employ? And so I'm really excited to bring more questions from the audience for you two, but we're going to bring out our next speaker. And so Yesenia and Shihir will be able to join us at the end of the Q&A. So don't forget to submit your questions if you have any for them. But I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. Thank you both so much. And so our next speaker is going to be Dan Flaming from Economic Roundtable. So let's bring him on. Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm good, Lucia. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this.
Oh, yes. We're so happy to have you.
So just briefly, I'm the president of the Economic Roundtable. We're a nonprofit research group. We're located in Los Angeles. We were formed in 1991. We've done over 100 major studies of labor, housing, poverty, environmental conditions throughout the United States, including a study of Amazon that I'm pleased to share with you. This study looked at impacts in the Inland Empire.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that you have so much expertise in terms of the research that you've done specifically to the financial impacts Amazon has on communities. And so we're so lucky that you can share that insight with us. And so you've really researched and written about the costs and benefits of Amazon warehouses and communities in the ways that it might not be a great financial deal for many cities, as much as they would expect. And so how would you describe the hidden costs of having Amazon in our community?
Well, to start my answer to that, Lucia, by way of background, we did Public Record Act requests of 39 cities. So we got their environmental impact reports for building warehouses. We which contain the estimates of how many trucks are going to come and go from each warehouse, how many people are going to work there, what the environmental impacts are. Invariably, those reports showed a lot of negative impacts on neighborhoods and on infrastructure, and invariably the rationale for city councils in approving it was that, hey, we need the jobs. So this was typically a response in communities with greenfield space, undeveloped open space, and cities that were hungry for economic activity. And so here was something that they could cut a ribbon for. But the reality is that Amazon locates warehouses where land is cheap and where there are energized, reliable workers who badly need jobs and will work for comparatively low wages. So, and the goods that Amazon sells are predominantly purchased by affluent communities. So what you have is goods coming in the port of Long Beach and the port of Los Angeles in containers being shipped by truck 60 miles or so to the east to these 21 or so warehouses in the Inland Empire, and then being aggregated by type of goods and by address and being shipped back to affluent communities in Orange County and the west side of Los Angeles. So it's a great deal of two-way traffic. For the Inland Empire, there are every day ships, trucks, trains, and airplanes bring an estimated 21,500 diesel truckloads of merchandise. So it is an enormous amount of truck traffic. Over the course of a year, it's 15.5 billion ton miles of cargo being moved. So in this transit from port to warehouse, the passage is through often low-income communities. And so there is damage to the infrastructure. These 21,000 truck trips a day wear out freeways, they wear out bridges, they produce diesel particulate matter that's carcinogenic, that's very unhealthy, as well as other engine emissions. They cause a greenhouse gas warming. So, and each of these warehouses are typically 1 million square feet. That's 20 acres under one roof. These are enormous facilities. They operate around the clock with trucks coming and going, and often they're very near residential neighborhoods. So there's damage to air, to health, there's noise damage that affects property values, there's damage to roads. So just using the factors in the environmental impact reports for these warehouses, we estimated that there was $642 million a year in uncompensated damage to the public by the movement of these trucks. And there's also greenhouse gas emissions that are real, as we know, and that affect agriculture, that affect health, and affect ecosystems. So there's additional damage to our ecosystems and to the planet we live on that's increasingly unbalanced. We also looked at the costs, just the social safety net costs for warehouse workers, and typically workers were using Medi-Cal for health insurance. That was by far the most frequent form of health insurance coverage for these workers, and many workers were receiving food stamps. So our analysis was that for every dollar that Amazon paid to a warehouse worker, there was 24 cents in public costs, mostly for Medi-Cal health insurance and also for food stamps.
Wow. So it sounds like even though Amazon is bringing in these jobs, it's like our cities are still subsidizing these jobs for Amazon and really paying the cost. And our communities are paying the cost by their health and their environment really being degraded from all the pollution that comes in from the massive freight.
That captures it very well, Lucia.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's what the excitement that we did hear from some city leaders is, the financial benefits that an Amazon warehouse brings to our communities. And so that brings me to my next question, which is really how reliable would you say the sales tax revenue Amazon brings to cities?
So we conducted a very careful analysis of that. The way sales tax happens is that we pay roughly 10% sales tax when we buy something, including stuff off of Amazon. That money goes to the Board of Equalization in Sacramento. And then out of that 10 cents on a dollar that we've sent to Sacramento, 1 penny out of it, 1 penny out of that 10 cents goes back to the place where the sale occurred. So Amazon is part of an industry category called electronic retail, electronic sales, and it gets rolled up into a group called other retail. So the Board of Equalization reports that dollar amount for every city in the state. And so we looked at the cities where the warehouses are located, and we looked at their neighboring cities. We looked at this in total and also per capita by city. And there is no sales tax flow out of warehouses that we could identify. The cities with warehouses tended to get much less than neighboring cities, even cities with the same income profile. So our analysis was that this penny on the dime rebate of sales tax revenue is going to the city where the purchaser lives. So if they live in San Dimas, or if they live in the city of Los Angeles, that penny is going to their home city rather than to where the warehouse is located. We did find that there were frequent tax breaks for these warehouses. When you build anything commercial, there are impact fees for it. There are impact fees for road use, so they estimate, the worker traffic, the truck traffic, and there are impact fees out of that, park fees, school fees, so forth. We found that cities typically waived roughly half of the impact fees that they levy. So the cities were not getting any sales tax revenue that we could find after looking at it very carefully, and they were rebating money they should have collected to repair bridges and roads. And those impact fees are not sufficient. There's enormous effects out of these trucks, and they were waiving money that should have been spent to widen and maintain roads that are seeing all of this truck traffic. So we didn't see revenue benefits, and we also saw that Amazon was a fickle tenant, and that they moved on and left warehouses behind when there were cheaper places they could work out of, where labor was cheaper and real estate was cheaper.
And so, yeah, I think the excitement was really around the financial benefits, but from what we're hearing from you is those financial benefits aren't very secure, and the purchases being made for the products being stored in our communities, that money is not going to be benefiting Oxnard.
That's right. So the only identifiable benefit we could see was payroll to workers, that workers living in the community would get jobs, they would get wages, there would be social safety net costs that go along with that, and often a pretty darn stressful life, as your other speakers have said, for those workers.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing that insight with us. And like our other speakers, we're going to bring you back with us, Dan, at the end for our Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'm really excited to be introducing our next speaker, who is really going to talk to us about what is it like living next to an Amazon warehouse. And so let's bring in Yvette Torres from CCAJ. Hi, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, Lucia. Thank you for having me, and hi, folks in the Central Coast. My name is Yvette Torres. My pronouns are she, they, and I am the interim policy coordinator here at the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice, or CCAJ for short. And I'm also a resident of the Inland Empire. I've lived in Moreno Valley, which is a city here in the inland region, for the past, I want to say, almost like more than 15 years. And so I have seen firsthand the impacts of warehousing, specifically Amazon has had on Moreno Valley. I know Shahir and Dan and Yesenia kind of talked a little bit about Moreno Valley as one of the case studies and the facts. But yeah, I just really want to share just some of the things that we've kind of heard the community members shared with us, and just what it's like to live in an area that's so concentrated on Amazon houses or Amazon warehouses. So it's not like it's only one warehouse, right, that is coming up or popping up in our neighborhoods and communities. It's multiple Amazon warehouses. Here in Moreno Valley, we have around 3 to 4 Amazon warehouses, and like folks were mentioning, they're huge, and around that is more warehousing that is not just Amazon. And so when you look on the aspects of, you know, the cumulative impacts that are coming from not just the one warehouse but the multiple warehouses, it adds up. I know earlier some of the speakers mentioned how there's a lot of trucks coming in and out of the Amazon facilities, and that's true. We've had community members and our organizers do what we call truck counts on our main intersections and main freeways, and we've seen up to 1,000 heavy duty trucks per hour. And so when you think of the particulate matter that comes out of those trucks and the diesel coming out of those trucks, it really plays a huge impact on the health of our communities. And it's no surprise that the Amazon warehouses are built in communities that already have the highest rate of asthmas and low income. And our communities of color, specifically in San Bernardino and Moreno Valley, where we see that big spatial concentration of warehouses that are Amazon, it's a lot of low income Latino and brown and black communities, and we see huge asthma rates. And it's a lot of I think Dan mentioned this, is costs that aren't even seen. I know community members talk about the fact a lot of them are undocumented, right? And even if they don't work at an Amazon warehouse, but living by one, they have those costs of having to deal with their kids who may have asthma and have asthma, things that they can't really pay for, right? For an inhaler, things that folks with insurance, we kind of think twice about. These are things that are coming out of their pockets, costs out of that they have to deal because the Amazon decided to move into this community. It's not that the community moved into this, but the Amazon came to them. And so there's a lot that goes into that. And we hear time and time again communities saying they're tired of warehouses coming in. They don't want to see any more warehouses. And I'm sure, like at the community here in Oxnard, you all are tired of fighting power plants and Monsanto, I can't say that word ever, Monsanto. And just like the community in the Inland Empire, you know, we're tired of the logistics movement because it's not just the warehousing, it's the trains, the freight expanding into the communities, dealing with BNSF. There's also gas plants in our communities. So it's all these different impacts of, you know, when are we going to have clean air? Why is it that I have to, you know, mostly right now with COVID, stay indoors? And my family has to stay indoors in fear because we all deal with asthma or respiratory illnesses. And that was something we saw a lot when COVID first arrived. A lot of our community members were really afraid because a lot of them deal with asthma, lung cancer, and all these unfortunate health impacts from the air quality in the Inland Empire. And a lot of that, we this year alone, from May to October, every day was an unhealthy air quality day. And that mostly comes from the ozone from the impacts of these trucks. And so it's a little frustrating to be living to an area that is really concentrated in Amazon fulfillment centers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from what I heard from you is really talking about this large volume of trucking going in and out of our communities. And for you in the Inland Empire, it's not just one warehouse, but it's multiple, and they're concentrated. And we heard from our other speakers is that that's a trend that comes with Amazon moving into a community. Once Amazon moves in, there's going to be another warehouse and another. And I feel like in the Inland Empire, you'll all really experience that trend. And so I guess I wanted to see if maybe you could touch on this a little bit, but really the health implications around this high volume of trucking, and that really being connected to the high concentration of warehouses. You all work with community. Could you talk a little bit more about just that hidden cost of kind of what we talked about with Dan, of how our health is really impacted by these warehouses?
Yeah, of course. Like I mentioned, a lot of our community deals with asthma, and it's not just the asthma, because then the asthma then leads into like strong bronchitis, lung cancers. We've had community members who organize with us or got involved because they've lived in the area for a while, that they were really healthy, and out of nowhere they developed an asthma or had an asthma attack. Or we have community members who the young children aren't verbal, right, because they're like 3 or 4 and can't really say much, and they've had asthma attacks, and they can't really say what's bothering them, right? They're not verbal, and that's just so frustrating for a lot of the parents in our community. The fact that they believe they're moving into these communities to give their children a better life, but in the reality, it's they end up having asthma or developing asthma, and that stays with you forever for the most part. I can personally speak on that. I didn't have asthma, but living in the IE, I've developed asthma, and it's like allergy enhanced asthma. So whenever we have unhealthy air days, which is 7 out of the 12 months, I know I need my inhaler with me to even go outside. This year alone in the summer, just stepping outside, you could feel your eyes burning of that. And a lot of our community, they really speak on that. They make that toll. They advocate to their city councils, to planning commissioners, and mostly a lot of our undocumented community. They may not be the ones electing these folks into those seats, but they sure can speak on the impacts that these Amazon warehouses have had to their health, and how much that's costing them, and the fact that they don't even get that support or that help, right, is a big issue right now in our community.
It's great to hear how organized and mobilized the community is in the IE, because it's important. And I mean, speaking about communities, are bringing us to our last question, and really just being like outright blunt about this, is like, why is it that Amazon warehouses are often in communities of color, while tech offices for these big companies are typically in white affluent communities?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's the pattern, right? I know a lot of our speakers earlier kind of already touched on that, but it's the fact that it's these Amazon warehouses are coming into our communities. It's not the other way around, right? These are communities where it's the reality. It's a lot of low income. A lot of times, first generation, like just migrated to the United States. So sometimes a lot of the community, like a lot of my family members, a lot of the community work with, there's like multiple families living in one home. But just because it allows for that, right? These are homes that it's better than being crutched up in maybe an apartment, and they feel like they could at least afford a better life. But then these warehouses come into the community, and they kind of know, right? They know that they're intentionally coming into a community that is low income and in a community of color. They know they can get away because these communities are dealing with having to, work, attend to their children, attend to, those issues that are kind of really prominent, the health impacts, right? So they really can't have the time to just go out and advocate and say, we don't want this warehouse here, right? I mean, a lot of them do, and that's, to me, I am amazed in the fact that folks are out there after like having a 12-hour shift at a warehouse. But in a community that's more white and affluent, and there's more income, their city council, there's folks like talking and connecting to their city councils, and they know like, oh, we don't want this in here, then it's not in here, and then they send it to a community like ours in the inland region or in Oxnard, right? Versus like, you don't see, and this is something I hear a lot, and it's really frustrating, like I hear city council members saying, well, who else is going to come into our community if not an Amazon warehouse? It's not like they want to build tech centers here. And I'm like, you don't know that. I mean, obviously in the trend of how our society is, warehouses and they're even admitting, are picking out communities that are purposely, right, disadvantaged, that are EJ communities. And instead of trying to push and advocate for something that is a more sustainable job and a healthier job for the community, but instead they know that these warehouses purposely target our communities. And it's a little hard because you hear half of the community really buy into that idea that this is the only choice we have of work, when that's not true. We know there's other opportunities out there that can come into our communities, whether you have an education or not. That shouldn't stop that you have a job that is sustainable and that won't hurt your health and won't hurt your family's health or your neighbor's health.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that puts us at a really good tone to end our panel, and really this sense of empowering our community of, we deserve access to clean air, good jobs, a healthy environment. And Oxnard has been fighting for that for years, just like in the IE and within other EJ communities. So I'm excited to bring on the rest of our panelists. Let's get us all together. I've seen a lot of really great comments from everyone. And so yeah, I think that this is a really great time to start our Q&A and hear questions from the audience, hear questions from our community members. So, all right, we got everyone on here. Then we'll wait for Yesenia to turn her camera on. But yeah, we have our question from the audience is, what's the difference between an Amazon warehouse worker and a driver?
So I can answer that. So the differences are a few. Amazon drivers, the folks who drive the kind of grayish silver vans that deliver to your homes, or sometimes white vans, tend to be working for a third-party company. They're very small third-party delivery companies. They wear a shirt that says Amazon. They drive a van that says Amazon, but they don't actually get paid by Amazon. They usually make $1 or $2 an hour less than an Amazon warehouse worker generally, and those contractors kind of contract directly with Amazon to do that business. So they have a different job. They're often in a situation where they're not surveilled quite as much. There are cameras inside the vehicles, but they're not tracked quite as tightly. But they deal with a lot of the same issues that Amazon workers deal with elsewhere. So I think what we've seen generally is there tend to be more men in Amazon driving jobs in general, but in these jobs in specific. But in terms of the kinds of folks who are getting the jobs, it's just regular working class folks.
I could add to that that typically they're independent contractors rather than employees, and typically there is a fixed payment for a load of that maybe 200 packages that somebody is expected to deliver. So the same kind of time stresses that warehouse workers experience, these drivers also experience. They're being pushed to deliver the packages quickly. There are a lot of news accounts of traffic accidents by stressed, rushed, tired drivers, often trying to move through rush hour traffic to deliver packages.
I hope that offered some good clarity to the person that submitted that question. Do we have another question from the audience that we could add on? So we have this question coming from YouTube. It is, who do we hold accountable to advocate for better conditions and regulations?
Well, I would maybe make the comment that the city council has responsibility for having approved the warehouse, and the city council also has the legal authority to regulate wage levels. They can, it is entirely within their scope of authority to set a minimum wage for an industry such as warehouse workers. So I would recommend starting with the city council.
And I would like to invite maybe Yvette or Yesenia to chime in around, how are community members and workers organizing right now, and who are they looking to hold accountable?
Yeah, Yesenia, do you want to go first? Or I can go, whatever works.
Hi, my internet's glitching out. Like you guys are coming in and out. Would you? Oh, that's the question. How do you?
Or maybe Shahir, you could answer the question for Yesenia, since her
Yeah,
internet is.
I'll hop in. I think, yeah, Yvette can give another aspect of it. But obviously, there's a lot of different ways. The city council has approved it. I think there's ways that you can hold the company accountable directly. There's groups of organizations like ours that are part of a national network called Athena that are looking to hold Amazon accountable for their impacts on our country, both in terms of the workplace, but also broader issues in terms of the way they contract with ICE and in terms of the way they do business with providing surveillance tools to police departments, a lot of other aspects of what they do. So there's kind of broader kind of movements that are happening that you could potentially plug in with. And then I think there's, like ways that we can look to regulate the company. We are moving, policy to potentially change, like I said, this pace of work issue and make it so that employers can't push people quite as fast. There's other groups that are looking at how to keep companies from surveilling workers quite as much. And then maybe Yvette, you can speak to some of the issues around how to hold the company accountable on the environmental side.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Shahir. Yeah, as folks are asking, there's a lot that can be done. We're hoping can be done, mostly with the energy that the state is heading to, right? Trying to achieve these climate goals. So right now at the state level, CARB is just passed the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, and I'm sure some of the folks on here listening may have participated in that as a community member. But because of that rule, we are now pushing for another one that is the follow-up for that. It's called the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, and that rule will help to kind of put that stringency on the trucks, the heavy-duty trucks, and the fleets, right, that are coming out of places like Amazon to be zero emission. And they will have a certain percentage that these warehouses would specifically would have to meet, right? Or any industry would have to meet that is zero emissions. And so the hope right now is to advocate for a really strong advanced clean fleet rule. So that way communities like you all that are just starting to get these warehouses, and hopefully not anymore, right, have clean trucks coming in, have zero emission trucks coming in, have electrified trucks coming in, not near zero, but electric trucks. We don't need further dirty air. And that's kind of what we've really been advocating for in the inland region, is those state rules, but regional rules too. Right now in the South Coast, and this could be maybe a rule that you all adopt as well, we are pushing for the indirect sources rule in the inland region and the South Coast region. And that rule would be the first of its kind to regulate warehouses specifically to have zero emission technology. And so there's ways through that environmental justice lens, right? Because we want to make sure that the communities that are impacted the most by these Amazon warehouses and these trucks are the ones that are first in transitioning into that. And there's also local, right? I know Dan mentioned the city council is the first that we need to be advocating for. Riverside City just passed a policy called the Good Neighbor Guidelines, which would put regulations on how a warehouse could apply for permitting that are a lot stricter than what is now being seen. And so there's different ways that through your advocacy as a community member that we could push for better policy to get these electrified trucks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think our panel, we really talked about just the negative impacts, but I think you two really spoke to, there are a lot of positive things already happening and work that organizations are fighting to improve working conditions for workers, to improve clean air, and to make sure the polluting trucking is cleaner in the future in our communities. That's really great. Thank you for sharing that. Let's put on another question from the audience. How have Amazon fulfillment centers impacted the rest of the community's job market? I don't know who wants to take that one.
I can speak to kind of how it's been for us in the Inland Empire as Amazon has become more and more kind of dominant. Uh, Again, like I said, there a lot of people are initially really excited about the company coming to town, and look to try to get those jobs. But unfortunately, the more kind of professional long-term jobs, especially the more technologically skilled jobs, they don't hire local folks. They don't hire our people. They bring in people from outside. They ship in people with MBAs, even for the supervisory roles. They don't promote people from within. So it really does kind of add to the churn at the bottom of the workforce, and people kind of bounce in and out. But a lot of our folks don't, most people aren't able to hang on to those jobs and stay very long. And so it doesn't, really kind of create the kind of stability that you would think would come from a company of this scale.
Mhm. And so, yeah, lots of jobs coming in, but the high turnover rate, the poor working conditions, the long-term injuries, those are some other things that are really going to be impacting workers. So I think we have time for maybe one more question from the audience to end our Q&A. And this is what we have since Amazon is coming into Oxnard, as they wrote, the deal is done. How can we forecast the next deal, maybe that may just be just as damaging to our community? Who came next in other Amazon cities?
Well, maybe I could comment on that. What we saw from our Public Records Act requests was that Amazon played cities off against each other to get the best breaks that it could, particularly on impact fees. And so I think, for advocates, it is very important to insist on transparency, to insist on public hearings. Often Amazon warehouses are built under a different name. They have a development company out of Texas. They have a financing company out of New York. So the names, you don't necessarily see Amazon's name in the documents that are going through the city council, but it's not a secret what's going on. And so I do think it's important to have transparency, to have public process, and to press city councils to really weigh the pros and cons of this and to take ownership of the social costs that they're bringing into the community.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah.
If I can just
Yes,
add, oh, sorry, go ahead. Thank you, Dan, for that. I also wanted to add that maybe for an area like you all on the Central Coast, some other indicators, if more Amazons are coming in or warehousing or logistics, is the expansion of the infrastructure. We've seen that city councils or planning commissions will approve expansion of lanes, right? We will see main roads that were once 2-lane become 4 lanes. And that's to allow for the truck trips to come in and out of the warehouse. We've also seen freeways expanding, construction going on, and it's not really for the infrastructure of the community, but for the trucks that are coming in and out of these fulfillment centers from Amazon, from other logistics centers. So those are other ways that you can also kind of keep a lookout for if you see infrastructure being proposed or changing in your community. That's another way. So that's because these deals sometimes are done behind closed doors. That can be a way to keep track.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think sharing those indicators around the freeways expanding or just making room for more freight or more trucking to be possible in our communities, for us to look out for that, to really pay attention to what our city councils are discussing and deals that they're making. I think we might have one more good question from our audience, and then we'll close out. So we have for the next community forum, how can we continue building bridges between the IE and Oxnard and all other communities that are impacted by Amazon, really building bridges between the work that you all are doing and learning from your expertise. And so anyone that could answer that and share with people how we can stay connected.
So I can speak for our organization, Warehouse Worker Resource Center. We're partners with CAUSE in the network called Partnership for Working Families, and found different projects to collaborate on. And we're really excited to support any kind of work and research or organizing you guys are doing around this Amazon facility. There's other areas where we've collaborated in the recent past. There was a campaign around Safety Net for All. Around unemployment benefits for undocumented folks that I think is going to be an ongoing campaign that we'll be engaged with you guys. So I think there's lots of similarities in our communities and a lot of opportunities to hold the powers that be in our communities that don't have our folks' best interests in mind, hold those folks accountable. That's a really similar dynamic that we have in the Inland Empire, Riverside, and San Bernardino that to the political dynamic you guys have in your counties. And the need to make that change is huge. So I think there's a huge amount of common opportunity to learn from each other, and we'd love to continue to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we'd love that too. Well, thank you all so much. And I think the benefit of this panel was we were able to connect with community partners and relationships that CAUSE already has across the state, like Shahir mentioned. And so really this panel was around informing the community. There were a lot of questions and concerns, and we really hope that this panel offered clarity for our community around working conditions, impact to our environment, and really what are the benefits that are going to come to Oxnard. And so in this Q&A, I think that we heard also some really positive solutions that could come out of us organizing and working as community, just like Warehouse Worker Resource Center is doing, and other organizations throughout the state, like CCAJ as well, and the IE. And so that is what our hope is to stay informed and really to be able to continue our work around improving working conditions, trying to get work with CARB around getting clean air and improving trucking regulations. So when Amazon is coming into other communities, like they are coming into Oxnard, that we can make sure that our communities are set up the best way to protect our families and working people. And so we want to end with being able to get people to stay connected to this issue, to this campaign. We're going to add a Google form to the comment section where anyone that is interested in staying involved, staying informed on what are the next steps or what's going on with Amazon moving into Oxnard. This list of contacts, anyone that fills out the Google form will be able to connect with you. And so we'll be posting that in the comment section. Please share it with anyone else in your community that would like to stay informed or get involved. But we just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and a special thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge from your communities. And I hope you all stay safe and healthy. And thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.